Hello crafty friends, welcome back to Jenny Love Journals. So I have my vintage Halloween TN journals finished finally. So I'm going to go ahead and do a flip through with you guys and show you what all four of these look like. All four of these are now available for purchase in my Etsy shop. So if you are interested in purchasing any of these four, go head over to my Etsy shop and see if any are available. The link to my shop will be in the description below. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Before I get started in showing you guys the journals themselves, I want to show you some things that are going to be included with the journals. These are just some leftover things that I had after I was done with the journals. Each journal will get a pack of these. So instead of throwing these away or putting them away until next year, I just figure I'll break up whatever I have left into 4 groups and, you know, let you guys have some of them. They're basically, I'm not going to take them all out, but there's some die cuts, some fabric pieces, some scrapbook paper, some cutouts, cut aparts, things like that. Some, you know, things that you can die cut yourself, some little pieces, like I said, of scrapbook paper, you know, a whole bunch of little things, just some random things. And all 4 packs have different things, but like the same concept, if you will. There's even a fabric cluster in that one because I had a fabric cluster left over. This is a bigger one, not because there's more in it, but because there was a bigger piece in this one that I couldn't fit in the smaller bag. This won't necessarily fit in the journal. It's a little bigger, but you can cut it down if you want to. But yeah, each journal will come with a little goodie bag of scraps and leftover pieces that I had after I was finished creating the journals. All right, so let's start with this. Every journal is the same size, and every journal is only one signature. And there are 36 pages front and back, and the measurement of the journal is 9 inches by 5 3/4 inches. So again, each journal is different as far as the way it looks. The covers are made with Halloween themed scrapbook paper, but I did bind the spine with fabric to make it more durable when you're opening it and closing it and flipping through and things like that, so that the edge of the scrapbook paper doesn't crack or rip eventually, because it is just, you know, a thick cardstock scrapbook paper. It's not thin by any means. It's, you know, a thicker scrapbook paper, but I did line the spine of every single one of these for durability. There's some fabric clusters on each one of them, and I decorated the covers. I sewed the center pieces down onto the cover, as you can see. So let's start by going through this one. This is, I made this into a tuck here, and this is a vintage, it's a clipping out of a vintage 1980s newspaper for Halloween costumes. So I found this 1980s newspaper when I actually purchased some vintage sewing patterns, and the sewing patterns were wrapped in vintage newspaper. And as I was going through the newspaper, I noticed these Halloween ads, so I clipped them out and saved them for this project, and I backed it onto orange cardstock. You'll find a lot of ephemera pieces in here from KB and Friends for the vintage Halloween. And there's a lot of vintage pieces in here, which I'll show you. This is a glassine bag that I decorated. I hung this spider web off of the card that's inside of it, and when you open it up, there's some writing space. A little candy corn, go trick-or-treating. There's some candy corn papers. A lot of the papers are digital, and some of the signature pages came out of a 1964 Jack and Jill Halloween edition magazine. Here's a pocket that I cut out using my Cricut. And then this is a tag that I cut out on my Cricut. Lots of cute, excuse me, cute ephemera pieces in all of these journals. Come on, get in there. Some of the pockets are a little tight, but once you start taking things and out, they'll loosen up. This is a page out of the Jack and Jill Halloween magazine, 1964 edition. Here is a little pocket inside. This is a chalkboard tag, and basically it's designed so that you can write on it using chalk and you can wipe it off. And I just glued this little ghost on there so you can write on the back, and this little piece of burlap twine. This is a like a gift tag, but a Halloween one. This is a vintage playing card, picture charades playing card with a ghost, and a vintage playing card. Put these all back in. That's the weird part. All of these pockets, by the way, are packed full. Like every pocket has multiple things in them. These are giant index cards. I just left them blank for journaling. These are some fabric flips. And then underneath is vintage ledger paper so that you can write a secret entry and cover it up with your fabric flips. Here's a fabric pocket that I sewed. And in here we have, this is a vintage card that came out of a kit that a teacher would have back in like the 70s or 80s to give herself and her students some ideas to act out a scene or write a story. And this is like a Halloween theme, Halloween spook house. And then this is a piece from the digital. And then this is a vintage time card that I embellished. I had a lot of fun making these journals, a lot of fun. This is another sheet out of the vintage Jack and Jill magazine. I just glued those little ghosts and cats up there. This is a fabric ruffle. I love the stitching that I did on that one. I don't know, that's like my favorite stitch pattern. Some of you saw me make this on camera. It's a vintage bingo card that I embellished. And this is a vintage postcard from Salem, Massachusetts. My mother's friend sent these to me years ago, a whole big pack of them that she collected over the years by going to Salem. And I saved them and I put them away for a project such as this. So I pulled a few out. Every journal has one and they're all different. And this is a piece from the digital kit. Here's a little pocket, and in here is a piece from the kit. And this is another vintage newspaper clipping from a 1980s newspaper. It's got Lucy from Peanuts. And I just backed it onto cardstock. Here's another pocket. This is a vintage Rolodex card that I backed onto orange cardstock, and I stuck a few things on there to embellish it so you can write on the back and the front. This is a piece from the kit and a guest check that I embellished a little bit. And then this pocket I cut out using my Cricut. And I put Happy Haunting up there, as you can see. Page from the magazine. Here is a belly band, and in the belly band is just a piece from the kit, a large piece from the kit that you can write on. This is a pocket that I made out of another vintage newspaper clipping. It's for Halloween decorations. Hand-painted, bisque, porcelain, assorted varieties, lighted Halloween sculptures for only $12.99. So I backed it onto cardstock and made it a side tuck and put these pieces in there from the kit. Here's a blank ledger paper, and I stamped on the poison bottle with the skeleton. Y'all seen me do that video where I was stamping. Clipped to the side of the page here is a few pieces from the kit. Here's the other side of the index cards. Another page from the vintage magazine. I cut this out of the magazine. There goes a witch with a tall black hat, a wide black cape. And this is on tea-stained paper. Here's another pocket, and in here are just some pieces from the digital kit from KB and Friends. And then on the back cover, this is an index card, but this is a napkin, and I decoupaged the napkin onto the index card. It's actually two index cards that I glued together to make it very durable. And I glued the second one right side up so that you would have the lines to write on. And then again, I just decoupaged this napkin onto the index card and put it in this large pocket in the back, and then there's my signature right there. Okay, so there's that one. This is Costumed Cuties is what I named this one. So if you're interested in the Costumed Cuties journal, see if it's still available in my Etsy shop. And then the next one, I named this one Haunted Tales, and of course it's got some embellishing on it. And I lined the spine with some fabric like I did with the other one. This is a thick cardstock scrapbook paper and a fabric cluster. I love that, so pretty. And then I sewed it, or not pretty but cute, I sewed around the edges of that. Okay, so going in, there's nothing on the front cover of this. I was going to put some fabric pockets in on the inside covers. Some of you might have seen the video where I started doing that, but realized that they weren't large enough for the fabric pockets that I made. So I put this fabric pocket over here on this side. And in this one, there's a few pieces from the kit. And then another vintage school card, Goofus the Ghost. And again, these were back in the 70s and 80s to give teachers and students ideas of stories and things like that. This is another time card that I embellished. I just put Halloween here and then put a fabric cluster on the top. By the way, these journals in my Etsy shop are $39 each with free shipping. Here is another vintage newspaper clipping for a black cape. Just backed it. And then a few pieces from the kit. Lots and lots of writing space. But anyways, I know sometimes when people are watching my flip through videos, they wonder how much the journals are, but they don't really want to go over and look because they're too busy, or so I just figured I'd let you guys know. $39 each with free shipping. This is a page out of the vintage Jack and Jill magazine. Here's a small pocket that has another chalkboard tag, a vintage flash card that I embellished, a vintage playing card for the game Flinch, and then another Halloween gift tag. How cute is that? I love it. Lots and lots of stuff in these pockets. Like I said, these pockets are loaded. This should go back here because there's some rickrack down here and it's making it so that that wouldn't go down in all the way. And then this is it's not vintage, but it's made to look vintage, the paper. Here are some more index cards for writing, another fabric flip, a top of a vintage ledger page, another fabric ruffle. This pocket I made out of an image that was in the 1964 Jack and Jill Halloween magazine, and I just backed it onto orange cardstock and turned it into a side tuck. And here is a tag that I cut out on my Cricut, and then a piece from the kit, and then another vintage Salem, Massachusetts postcard. When I say vintage on the postcards, they're considered vintage. They're from the 1980s. Piece from the magazine, another pocket with several pieces from the digital kit. These were just blank because they're on the other side of scrapbook paper that had nothing on the other side, so I did some stamping. I did these on video. You guys might recall seeing me do these if you watched that video. And then here's a little side pocket. This is a vintage game card for picture charades, and it's got a bat. And then this is another Rolodex card that I embellished. I backed it with this black and white scrapbook paper, put a little leaf there, and then put this on the top. And it's blank on the back so that you can write on the back and the front. piece from the magazine, tea stained paper. This is a belly band. I put a fabric cluster there, and then this is from the kit, and it's blank on the back. I almost used this piece as one of the cover pieces, but I decided to do a different one. This is a piece from the kit. I love that. Couple pieces from the kit clipped to the side there. Here's another pocket with a fabric cluster, and then in here is another vintage newspaper clipping for a rainbow clown wig, and then a few pieces from the digital kit. And on the back pocket here is just a few pieces from the kit. How adorable is that? I love that. That is so cute. I wish I had that like in a bigger, way bigger size so I could like frame it and hang it, and my signature right there. So there is that one. That is the Haunted Tales journal. And then the next one I named Witching Hour because of what I put on it. And this centerpiece here is actually the front cover page from the 1964 Jack and Jill Halloween edition magazine. I loved the cover page, so I cut it out. Unfortunately, I had to chop off some of her nose to make it fit. And this little girl had her arm like flared out like, yay, we're riding a broom. But I had to cut it off, unfortunately, to make it fit. But I did sew around, excuse me, sew around it. Added a fabric cluster right there and a few other little embellishments. Wow, I'm sorry. I lined the spine with this. It's not fabric, but it's a very thick ribbon, if you will. And then it had this edge already on it, and this is scrapbook paper, a thick cardstock scrapbook paper. All right, so let's look in here. Here's another glassine bag. And in this one, I hung a little ghost off of this one. And when you open it up, it's got places for writing. Again, lots of digital papers and papers from the vintage magazine that I incorporated into the signatures. Here's a large pocket. Inside of this is another tag that I used to cut out on my Cricut. It says Boo. And then a piece from the digital kits. And then this is another one of those vintage school cards, Ghostly Decision. I got a whole box of those school cards, but there was only a few like Halloween ones. There's Christmas ones and Easter ones. So I pulled the Halloween ones for this. This is out of the page of the vintage magazine. Here's a little pocket here, another chalkboard tag, another vintage flash card that I embellished, a vintage playing card, and then a piece from the kit. Again, lots and lots of stuff in these pockets. I wanted to make sure that you guys got a lot of stuff because I had a lot of stuff. So I had no choice kind of to really fill up these pockets. Here's some more of the the index cards. Another fabric flip. I love this with the witch flying across the moon and the haunted house. On vintage ledger paper. Here's a fabric pocket, and inside here we have a few pieces from the kit. Clipped to the side of this page, graph paper, is one of these. Now, there's another one in the other journal that I haven't shown because I used two of these. Remember these guys? Remember these things back in like the 70s and 80s? How cute is that? So I included one in this one and one in the next one that you're gonna see. Here's a piece from the magazine. Fabric ruffle. These are just stamped on. Here's a side pocket, and here is a crow from the vintage game picture charades. Another vintage Rolodex card that I embellished, and then a piece from the kit. From the magazine, love that, with the little trick-or-treaters. There's a belly band, fabric cluster. This is another vintage 1980s newspaper clipping for Halloween accessories, and then a few digital pieces. Here's a bigger, larger piece from the kit that I have clipped to the side of the page here. And then I stamped that witch's hat down there. This is a large envelope, and in here I put a few larger pieces from the kit that wouldn't fit in pockets. So I just put them in this envelope and then clipped it to the side of the page. Love that. The October calendar, unfortunately I had to chop a little bit of it off. And then on, or in this pocket is another clipping from the vintage newspaper for Branch's Candy Corn. 79 cents a bag. And then a few pieces from the digital kit. Here is another vintage bingo card that I embellished on camera. Some of you may have seen me do that. I had a lot of fun with these. I love doing that. Here's a digital piece, and then another vintage postcard from the Witch City of Salem, Massachusetts. It doesn't say the year, but she told me that she got these in and around the 1980s when she gave them to me. She, meaning my mother's friend. And then on the pocket on the back cover, here is another gift tag. How cute is that? Piece from the kit. Another vintage newspaper clipping for toddler costumes. It did tear up here, but it is what it is. I just backed it. And then another piece from the kit. And then my signature there. So there is Witching Hour. Again, if you're interested in purchasing this, this is available right now in my Etsy shop. First come, first serve, of course. And then lastly, we have this one. I named it Halloween Fun. So this is the same thing. Basically, I sewed on the front piece and embellished it with some things, another fabric cluster down here, and I lined the spine with this fabric, which is actually this fabric that I'm using here to use as a background for this, on this thick scrapbook paper. And it's shiny. So there's that, Halloween Fun. Right on the inside cover is a fabric pocket. We have this tag, Do Not Disturb, and then a guest check that I embellished, and then another vintage Salem, Massachusetts postcard. I love this one. This one was my favorite out of all of them. It's very vintage looking. Love it. I almost didn't want to give it up. So if you end up with this one, please cherish it. Make sure it's going down all the way. Here is another pocket, another vintage game card, and it's a little boy dressed up like a pirate. Another vintage newspaper clipping for children's costumes. Here is another tag, Do Not Disturb, and then a piece from the digital kit. I didn't realize that I put the same two tags in this one journal, but oh well, it's okay. So you get two of the same ones. A piece from the vintage magazine. I love this. This is recipe for witch's brew, ghost sandwiches, and goblin cookies. And then here's a little pocket here with another chalkboard tag, vintage playing card, and then another gift card tag, or gift tag rather. Having trouble finding my words today. And on this background paper, how pretty is that? Very vintage. Some more fabric flip. Usually when I do fabric flips, I do like 3 layers, but for these I did 2. And that's on vintage ledger paper. Here's another fabric ruffle. Another piece from the vintage magazine. Here's another pocket. In this pocket, there's several goodies. So this is another index card where I decoupaged the napkin. So again, this is a napkin decoupaged onto the index card. And then a few pieces from the kit. And then this is another clipping from a vintage magazine for Kit Kats. And a witch. Because we all know that Kit Kats, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, what else? Tootsie Rolls, Dum Dum Lollipops. You know, those are all like signature Halloween candy, right? Oh, here's the other one on this one where you can draw and pull up the vellum there. And these are vintage, by the way. Those are from the 80s. Here's a side pocket, or a side tuck rather. Another pocket, and here's another vintage Rolodex card that I embellished and backed. And then another one of those vintage school cards. This one's called Witch's Brew. And then this is from the kit. Belly band, so I made the belly band out of scrapbook paper, and then I glued on this a piece that I clipped from that vintage 1964 Jack and Jill Halloween Edition magazine. This was part of the cover. It was at the top of the cover. It says TV's newest star, that friendly rascal and flipper, special Halloween section, a dancing skeleton, masks, cutouts, and games. I didn't want to throw that away. I wanted to save that. Pieces from the kit. And then this is a vintage Betty Crocker recipe card for Halloween pizza. And this is 1975. It's a recipe again for making Halloween pizza. And I don't know about you guys, but growing up, my dinner, Halloween dinner, was always pizza. Before we went out trick-or-treating, we had pizza. And then here's another couple pieces from the kit that I just clipped to the side of this ledger paper. Stamped the owl in the tree. Some more index cards. The other side of that, I love that. This is another piece from the magazine. Here's another pocket, another vintage newspaper clipping for monster masks. And then these pieces from the kit. Clipped to the side of this are just a few pieces from the kit. And then on the back cover, another pocket with some pieces from the kit. And then again, my signature. So there we go. There are all of the vintage Halloween TN journals. I call them TN journals because they're kind of not really necessarily the exact size of, but the form and the style are like traveler's notebooks. And they're only one signature each, but they're also junk journals, if you will, because I used a lot of vintage pieces in these. So you can call them whatever you want, traveler's notebooks, junk journals, whatever. They can pass for any of those categories. So anyways, again, these will be for sale in my Etsy shop if you are interested in purchasing these. $39 each with free shipping. And I will get them out within 1 to 2 days of ordering. I know Halloween is only 3 weeks away, and I was hoping to get these done sooner. I was actually hoping to get these done by last week. But unfortunately, I explained this in the intro of my last video, but my camera stopped recording. But my husband hurt his knee really bad, so he was out of work for a couple of days, and I was tending to him, so I didn't really get enough time to come into the craft room. And, you know, well, I kind of had time, but I chose not to. I chose to kind of be by his side and take care of him and spend time with him while he was laid up. He's better now. He's back to work. He's doing a lot better now. But that's why I didn't get these done as soon as I would have liked, but they're done. And we still have 3 weeks until Halloween. So if you want these in time for Halloween, grab them now. And like I said, I will get these shipped out within 24 to 48 hours after they are purchased to make sure that you get them well before Halloween, depending on when you order them. If you order them a few days before Halloween, I can't guarantee that, but anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me today and watching this video. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a great big thumbs up. Share it out to any family and friends who would enjoy it. Liking the video and sharing it out is absolutely free and helps me out tremendously. Don't forget to follow me over on Facebook and Patreon. Both links are down in the description below. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.